All right, and welcome to Conversations with Jacob right here on the podcasting platforms and on YouTube. On today's episode, we're talking porn addiction, and we'll get into our guest here. In a bit. But before we do, I was going to give a few podcast plugs. We're on social media on YT. We're on Twitter at CWJ Podcast. That stands for Conversations with Jacob. You can check out our merchandise. I think it's in the description below the podcast. You can find our hoodies, T-shirts, tank tops, mugs, tumblers, and so much more. We got probably about 20 to 30 items on there. And if you got a question or a guest idea or show idea, and you can send it to the mailbag at conversationswithjacob@gmail.com. You can also visit our website, conversationswithjacob.podcast.weebly.com. And you can find our schedule, our upcoming guests, our past guests, and so much. And we also got a playlist there as well to our TuneIn page and our iHeartRadio. We're also on Amazon Music. We're on Audible. We're on just about 20 different platforms. It's hard to keep up with them. Upcoming episode next week, and we're joined by Dan, if I can pronounce his name right, Dan Hegrich, and he's a 6-time cancer survivor. So we're talking with him. Our future guests include Jim Wittes, who is an author of many books. We're talking with Larry Getter, who did Elvis Presley's hair for many years, the Spy Guy, and who's into Elvis as well. And he was supposed to join us last week, if not already. And that episode is yet to be filmed. Michael and Jay from Elvis back on tour on YouTube, and they join us. And Stanley Primuth, a 9/11 survivor, joins us. Matthew Jordan, who's into politics, and he'll join us. And Jeff Striegel from the Motor Racing Network, and who does I guess it's commentate for NASCAR. Today I'm joined by Joshua Shea, and who is a porn addiction expert, which he has been on. He's done a TED Talk. He's wrote books. He's been on numerous podcasts. Now he's on my podcast. So Joshua, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Jacob, and I appreciate the bagpipes. I felt just like Rowdy Roddy Piper walking to the ring in 1984.
Absolutely. When you requested the bagpipes, I said I gotta make this happen. So I did. I guess to start this off, now to open up the topic here about porn addiction, and why do you think it's a topic that nobody will talk about?
I think that if you look at the last 100 years of society, and this is internationally, we have gone from a very puritanical, very conservative sexual society to a very liberal, open one. But it's happened so fast that some of the older generations who still control things, the older generations that still run governments, don't recognize what's happening with the younger generations. The older generations are still of the belief we can't talk about sex, we can't talk about porn. Let's pretend that nobody looks at it. Let's pretend that people are only having sex because they want to have children. And if you want to talk about any kind of behavior outside of that, those people who are in control will tend to try to silence you or pretend it's not there. They're still very embarrassed about this. They were not raised being open about this. It's kind of interesting. When I work now as a coach for both pornography addiction addicts and for partners who are having betrayal trauma, And the people I talk to who are in pretty much over 40, 45 years old are in a completely different world than those who are under 40 or 45 years old. It's like they grew up on two different planets. And ultimately, I attribute that to the introduction of high speed internet to the world, because those people who are 20, 25, 30, they are willing to talk openly about sexuality, willing to talk about the pornography problem that's facing the world because they've grown up with it. They saw it firsthand. They don't have all the taboos in their mind that their parents or grandparents may have. So it's interesting that I coach both sides of the thing, but those kids really who are 20, 25, they're not in any positions of power in this world to make any difference. So we still live with this kind of BS veil that nobody looks at porn. We still shouldn't talk about pornography. Nobody, ever touches themselves. That doesn't happen. Those are only the really sick, twisted perverts. When the reality is, we know based on studies, based on statistics, based on personal uh, uh, testimonies that far more people look at porn than don't. Far more people pleasure themselves that don't than don't. And thankfully, I believe we are starting to turn a corner on not being willing to talk about it because we were such a puritanical society for so much of the 20th century.
All right. Do you think, and during COVID, that the rate in porn addiction kind of went up?
Oh, it absolutely went up. We know this looking at traffic statistics from independent websites that track that kind of stuff. You look at a site like Pornhub, which is probably it's not the largest in the world, but it's the most well-known one, at least in North America and Europe. Um, their day-to-day traffic exploded between 50 and 70% right after the pandemic started. But to tell you the truth, despite the fact that millions of more people were watching porn because they were stuck at home, I think that the real legacy of the pandemic long term is going to be how it changed the online pornography world, from one of there are exclusive porn stars out in Hollywood or wherever making this stuff. Suddenly, with things like OnlyFans and all the cam sites that are out there, the average young man or woman could become a porn star. And during the pandemic, at a site like OnlyFans, which is the most well known one, January 1st, 2020, they had around 300,000 people making pornography for their site.
Oh.
On January 1st, 2022, 2 years into the pandemic, they had over 3 million, or I'm sorry, over 2 million people making pornography on. So that's one website in 2 years where 1.7 million people worldwide decided to start making pornography on that website. That one website. That doesn't include all the cam sites. That doesn't include all the OnlyFans copycat sites. I truly believe that during the pandemic, we probably saw between 3 and 4 million people go to online pornography as a means of making money. And the third book I wrote was about the online world changing during the pandemic. And I absolutely believe that we are going to see more and more addicts of pornography, not just from the consuming side, not just from going to watch these naked people do their naked things, but from the actual creators side. In talking to a lot of these people, I believe a lot of the creators of the sort of do it yourself porn have porn addiction. I don't believe that it's that far off. I believe they're making porn because they like the attention. They like the dopamine. They like the oxytocin. They make pornography and get almost the exact same feeling that a lot of people get from viewing pornography who are addicts. I think and we won't really see the results of this for another 10, 20 years. But I believe, if you and I got back together in 2040 for an update of this, we would be seeing a lot of people in their 40s doing this cam stuff, not because they're making great money, but because they've always been addicted to it. It's just going to take time to prove that. But I think that's ultimately what we're going to talk about from the pandemic, is how making pornography became a reliable at-home job for people.
All right. Now, how do you think that people get addicted to porn? Does watching one video, let's say someone watches one porn video, does that make them which I guess a porn addict?
No, no. And just like, it's just like somebody who uh, goes and gambles one time, somebody who plays a video game one time. That does not make you an addict. And the reality is, there are far more people in this world who can watch pornography and not have it be a problem than people who do. It's much like drinking. There are plenty of people in this world who can have one or two beers and let it go at that. There are plenty of people who can watch porn once or twice a month and let it go at that. But then there is that percentage that doesn't have the self-control, doesn't have the discipline, and ultimately has some kind of trauma that they've learned porn addiction or porn use helps deal with. That's really where addiction comes from, is from trauma, is from childhood trauma. Almost everybody you talk to who is legitimately a porn addict will tell you that they started usually between the ages of 12 and 14 with their addiction.
Wow. Does porn affect your brain and make you, let's say someone watches porn and they go out to public and then they see a woman, then they get like, I guess thoughts in their head. Does the brain play a part in that?
Absolutely. What usually happens is the other way around, is that somebody will be out in public and see a good looking person or something sexual, and that then triggers them to want to go use pornography. That's a good sign of someone who is an addict, is that it's not that they watch porn and then want to go have sex with a real person. They see something sexually triggering out in society, and then they want to go back to their computer or phone and use pornography. That's what helps them deal with the world, is seeing these pixels on a screen.
Absolutely. Now, how is porn addiction like any other addiction?
I truly believe that for the most part, addiction is addiction is addiction is addiction. Yes, every addiction has its own unique side effects. If you are using heroin, you will get health side effects much quicker than if you're a gambling addict. But if you're a gambling addict, you're probably going to lose your house or lose your kid's college fund way before you're a video game addict. Everyone has its own unique side effects. But for the most part, the chemistry of what's happening in the brain to an addict is exactly the same. In fact, when they look at the exact chemical makeup of all the chemicals that come out of your brain from using pornography, the next closest addiction when it comes to that formula is cocaine addiction. So if you're trying to figure out, how bad is porn addiction, the pull to it, the lure to it, the chemicals that come from it, it's like cocaine.
Wow. And how can we keep kids away from porn?
I think what we can do is create an environment where they want to stay away from it. And I think we have to do that in an age appropriate way growing up. Um, so many parents seem to feel that talking to your kids about porn is the birds and the bees speech. And it's not. It's the speech of stay away from alcohol while you're young. Don't smoke cigarettes while you're young. I think that you can teach your 4, 5, 6 year old that nobody should see them without their clothes on, and they shouldn't see anybody without their clothes on. And you can teach them that, you may see naked people on one of your friends' phones or on one of their tablets, but kids aren't supposed to see this. And if you see this, come talk to mommy and daddy. Because kids who are 4 and 5 years old generally want to do the right thing. They generally want to learn what the right thing is. And I think instead of scaring them, or instead of introducing them to a very deep world of what pornography is, you can teach them a little bit more slowly. And just if you see pictures of naked people, come tell mommy and daddy, because kids aren't supposed to see that stuff. When you're older and you're grown up, you can make your decisions for yourself. But right now, we don't want you looking at this stuff, which is very similar to the speech my parents gave me for cigarettes and for drinking and for lots of other stuff. And I'm sure I would have followed it for a while.
Now, and what is the state of porn addiction in the world today?
Today, the numbers are getting worse than ever, and they are spreading across all demographics. For so many decades, the pornography industry basically went after your straight white male. They knew that they could get enough business for making porn for the straight white male that they never tried to branch out because they didn't know if they had the audiences elsewhere. But that was back when you had to hire professional actors and you had to make it on real film and develop that real film and edit that real film and distribute that film to the adult theaters and collect the receipts. And it was like putting out a real movie. And these days, if you have an iPhone and an account on any of, hundreds of porn websites, you can be making a movie at noon and be making money off of it by 6 p.m. same day. So now they are actually making movies that go after people of certain color, go after women, go after people of certain religions even, to try to make pornography that will appeal to that type of person, because they don't have to get as many people to watch it as they once did to make money. So what we're seeing is, while the straight white male numbers of porn addicts, it's slowly going up. You look at women, you look at black men, you look at LDS Church, Catholic Church, those numbers are exploding because they're finally making porn geared towards these people, and access is easier than ever before. You can now be a perfect Christian, or you can now be a, female first grade teacher and get your porn delivered straight through your phone or your home computer. And you don't have to be caught going into one of those theaters. You don't have to be caught at the store buying a dirty magazine. It's easier than ever for people to get access to this stuff, so they don't have to worry about being embarrassed and being found out that they're watching it. So more are watching it than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do you think porn should be banned?
I don't think porn can be banned.
Right,
So
yeah,
I don't think we should waste our time trying. We
absolutely.
learned in the US, we learned 100 years ago that we could not control the production and distribution of alcohol. And you think about how far back we were 100 years ago when it came to transportation, when it came to uh, technology, when it came to everything that has improved in the last 100 years. we have we're light years ahead of where they are now. With VPNs, with so much pornography already having been made, with the fact that it is uh, with the fact that it is such a sexually charged world, and that even is natural. People, we're only here because our parents went at it one day. That's really it. And it's not a bad thing, and it's not a taboo thing. Sexuality is a beautiful thing. That's what we need to teach people. And that's what we need to make sure that message is out there. You're never, there have been depictions of pornography since people could draw on cave walls. Um, you go and look at any museum at the ancient and medieval exhibit, you're going to find some pretty X-rated images on some of those vases and some of the other pottery that they've created. Sexuality is a normal thing. And even being curious about depictions of society is a normal thing, or pictures of sex is a normal thing in society. It's just when too much of it comes at you. And that's what we're seeing happen now with high speed internet. But we're never going to ban it. So we might as well learn to educate.
Might as well, yeah. So, and what's wrong with looking at porn?
It depends on exactly who you are and exactly the position you're in. If the worst case scenario is the children, because it gives them a sense of what sexuality is. It gives them a sense of what sex is. And those of us who have been in healthy relationships and healthy sexual relationships, we understand that pornography is fake. We understand pornography is not a documentary. Pornography is not a reality show. But what about these 13-year-old boys, 14-year-old girls who are watching porn? And that's their first depiction of sexuality. That's what they're going to think it is. That's where they're going to get their cues from this. That's a big problem. Another problem is, again, with the people who have the tendency towards addiction, it actually changes your brain chemistry. It actually makes you view the world and view sexuality differently. It can make you behave differently. Um, you know, what's wrong with it? There are so many people who hide it from their partners that it destroys a lot of marriages. I saw a statistic recently that more than 50% of divorce lawyers say that pornography is brought up as an issue in over half the cases now. Not necessarily the only reason that divorce is happening, but it's a problem in more than half of marriages that end up in divorce. So it's everywhere, and it's not healthy. I've read 100 to 200 studies. Some will say that it's inconclusive if it's unhealthy, depending on the area of study, but I've never read a single study that says pornography is actually healthy for you.
Well, I think you kind of answered my next question, and the question was: is a porn addiction always ever the partner's fault? Oh, so I
No,
think you can't. Yeah.
no, 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 not at all. Never, never.
All right. Now, and how can we? And what are the signs of porn addiction?
Signs of porn addiction would be things like thinking about pornography all day long, planning your day around when you're going to get to use it, choosing to use it over doing other pleasurable things that you used to enjoy more, um, doing things like when you're using it, uh, losing track of time. If you say, I'm going to look at porn for the next 15 minutes and then an hour goes by. Or another piece is when people are watching porn, especially addicts, and they decide that they need to find the perfect piece of pornography to finish their viewing with. That's something that you hear a lot from porn addicts. Um, and really, I mean, honestly, just asking the question, am I a porn addict? Should be a red flag for you, because I'm guessing you don't ask, you know, am I an addict at mowing the lawn? Am I an addict at going to work? Am I an addict at things that you're not an addict of? If you question if you're an addict of pornography, well, where there's smoke, there may be fire.
Absolutely. Now, if you got a porn addiction story, can you share that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. First thing I gotta say is people have to understand, who aren't addicts, that people who are addicts do not use for the same reason as non-addicts. I was a porn addict for 24 years. I probably only used for sexual pleasure the first few years. It was mostly about getting the chemicals that are produced during that activity, the dopamine, the oxytocin, the serotonin, the endorphins, all of these natural chemicals, which basically act as drugs in your system. Um, Creating these chemicals is why I wanted to use pornography. Creating these chemicals helped me deal with stress, helped me cope with life, helped me deal with anxiety. I really didn't care, especially the last 10 years using pornography. I didn't care what was on the screen, really. All I wanted was those chemicals. I wanted to feel better. So it's not that I watched so much more porn than everybody else. It's not that I watched super depraved porn compared to everybody else. It's that I did not use it as a sexual surrogate. Most people watch it between boyfriends and girlfriends, or a lot will watch with their spouse or boyfriend and girlfriend to spice things up. Or, it's just something that's there when they want to have an orgasm and feel a thrill, and porn is out there for them. For me, and for most porn addicts, it's about uh, it's about peace of mind. It's about feeling better. And you know that these images are going to prompt an orgasm. That orgasm is going to prompt the release of those chemicals in your brain. That's why you use it as an addict. And that's what it was for me, because and addiction, why people become addicts, it's almost always about trauma. I had trauma from my childhood, sexual abuse at the hands of a babysitter. There was some mental and emotional abuse at the hands of my grandmother. Um, this was why I used porn, was because I couldn't deal with the trauma. And trauma is just a fancy word for, buried pain. I wanted to get rid of that pain. I wanted to bury it, and I fooled myself into believing that when I used pornography, that stuff went away. And it went away to the point that I repressed a lot of those abusive memories. But I always used pornography. I always needed pornography to make me feel better. It was almost a daily thing. Um, I needed it to just get on with my life the way that, some people need to take medications. And when I talk to my clients who are porn users, most of them describe it as, I feel like it's something I have to do. I don't even want to do it, but I have to do it, almost like taking medicine. That's really what the point that I got to, was that it wasn't about a sexual thrill. It wasn't about anybody naked on a page or how sexy this person was or anything. It was about just trying to keep an even keel. And because I had this trauma from early in my life that I had not dealt with in a healthy way, I went with addiction, specifically porn addiction.
Now, do you think why people, I guess, watch porn because either, of course, like you said, maybe it comes from like, but do you think the other reason is because they, I guess, maybe get bored, and don't have nothing to do, so they, jump on the internet and just pull up porn and watch it?
It's everywhere.
It
And
is,
not, and
yeah.
it's not just that it's everywhere for adults, where, 25 years ago you would have to be 18 to rent a film or 18 to buy a magazine. Um, Now, if you can spell man, sex, and woman, and you have a iPhone or a Samsung Galaxy, you can be 10 years old and find this stuff.
That's
That's the
crazy.
biggest problem with it.
That's crazy. Now, now, can you talk to us about your books that you wrote?
Yeah, I've written 4 books. The first one, which was called The Addiction No One Will Talk About, is sort of my biography, um, my story of my last 5 years of addiction. The best one-on-one I think I wrote about my story. The next one I wrote was actually for partners. It's called He's a Porn Addict, Now What? And it's for partners who discover that their partner has lied to them. They've been using porn for a long time. What are they supposed to do? Because it's a betrayal. A lot of them will say, I don't want you looking at porn. 5 years later, they found out they've been looking at porn the whole time. Well, what else have they been lying about? And a lot of partners also feel like, well, if you could lie to me about this, has everything been a lie? Do you actually love me? Do you actually think I'm attractive? Is this our road to divorce? It's quite jarring when a partner finds out. So I wrote a book for the partners. And then, as I mentioned, my third book, which is called Porn in the Pandemic, looks at how the online world of pornography changed. And then finally, my most recent book is called I'm reading this book about porn addiction for a friend. And it is really a guide for people who are early in their porn addiction to do a little self diagnosing, do a little bit of understanding about it. I wrote that book sort of to be like the first 1 or 2 sessions of coaching when I give it. A lot of self tests to give, a lot of stories from some of my clients who have changed their names but shared their stories so people can see other people's stories and see themselves in it. And all 4 of these books are available on Amazon and other online retailers.
All right, there you go. Now, for someone that's watching or listening to this podcast that's addicted to porn, and how can they get away from it?
Well, if you're addicted, I'll tell you that I've never seen anybody become fully healed by themselves. There are a lot of modalities out there. There's rehab, there's therapy, there's coaching, there's 12-step groups, online forums, research, um, other types of group therapies. Uh, there's a lot of different ways to heal out there, and I urge people try a little bit of everything because for some people, 12-step groups are the complete answer, and for some people, they don't even come close. So I always urge, number one, talk to somebody who's an expert. Number two, talk to somebody who has had this but is doing much better so you can actually see somebody who is improving. And have these two people talk to these two people honestly, find out where you are and find out what they suggest for you since they know so much more about this than you do. But if you think you have a problem, like I said earlier, odds are you probably do. And odds are you need to talk to somebody and figure out where things are so you can figure out a strategy for taking care of it.
Well, there you go. All right, Josh, which I think we're here at the end of the podcast. And uh, if you have anything else to say, then the floor is yours.
Yeah, I just want to remind people that anybody can be a porn addict. When you think of someone who smokes cigarettes, when you think of somebody who drinks to excess and has an addiction, you don't think of any specific type of person. Yet I think there are still a lot of people out there who, when they think porn addict, they think of like a 19-year-old guy who lives in his mom's basement that's never kissed a girl in real life, or the 65-year-old guy who runs around in the trench coat flashing people in the park. And while these people may be porn addicts, anybody can be a porn addict. I have met men and women ranging in age from 15 to 75, professional people, doctors, lawyers, nurses, teachers. I've met smart people, stupid people. I've met rich people, poor people. There is no stereotypical porn addict. You cannot say, well, because I am this and I am this, I don't have a porn issue. That's just not the case anymore. If you believe you may have a porn addiction, you probably do. There is no demographic that is free of porn addiction.
Well, there you go. And of course, was I get one more question? For those who do have an addiction, do you think the reason that they don't want to talk about it is because either they might be embarrassed to talk about it, or they don't want friends and family to consider them like a porn addiction person?
Right. Well, because in society it's still so taboo. I think that, when you and I were younger, we kind of looked at, oh, the perverts look at porn, the perverts masturbate to porn. Nobody does this except people who are sick in the head. And we know these days that of men who use the internet, 91.5% use pornography at least once a month. Of women who use the internet, we know that 60.2% look at pornography at least once a month. If you are genuinely, honestly not looking at pornography, you're not part of the silent majority. You are part of the loud minority.
Yeah.
The silent majority are using porn on a regular basis, and the vast majority are using porn on a regular basis. And whether that's good or bad, whether that's moral or immoral, I leave that up to other people. I just try to share the statistics and say that we need to now be in a world where we're talking about this stuff because it's affecting people like never before. What could have been done for me had I been born 20 years later? Could I have avoided porn addiction? I don't know, but somebody's going to be out there talking about this stuff and saying that it can be avoided and it doesn't have to destroy relationships and marriages.
Absolutely. Well, Josh, was I want to thank you for coming on the podcast to talk about this, which I surely learned a lot from it, and I hope the listeners did too. So, Josh, once again, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Of course. All right. This is it for this podcast of Conversations with Jacob. Tune in next week to where we talk with Dan Hegridge, if I pronounced that right, next week, and as we talk about cancer and conscious healing. Until then, be safe, God bless, and we'll catch you in the next one.